I never believed old family stories because everyone said my grandfather was just a quiet man who lived alone in a forgotten house outside a small American town. After his funeral, no one wanted the property because the roof leaked, the walls were cracked, and every room smelled like dust and old wood. My parents told me to sell it as quickly as possible because they believed it was worth almost nothing, but something inside me refused to let it go. I kept remembering the last thing my grandfather whispered while holding my hand: "Do not let strangers touch my house because everything you need is already waiting for you." Those words stayed in my mind every single day until I finally drove to the old place. The house looked even older than I remembered. Tall grass covered the front yard, broken windows reflected the gray sky, and the front door opened with a loud creak that echoed through every empty room. I walked inside carrying only a flashlight and a backpack. Every step filled the air with dust, as if the house had been waiting for someone to return. Family photographs still covered the walls. My grandfather smiled in every picture, but there was something different in his eyes, something he never told anyone. I searched every room hoping to find a letter or an old journal that could explain his strange final words. Instead, I found empty cabinets, broken furniture, and shelves covered with thick layers of dust. Hours passed, and I was ready to leave, believing there was nothing hidden after all. Just as I reached the front door, I heard a strange hollow sound beneath my feet. I stepped back and pressed the wooden floor again. The sound was different from the rest of the house. It felt like there was an empty space underneath. My heart started racing. I moved the old rug away and noticed scratches around one wooden board, as if someone had lifted it many times years ago. I grabbed an old hammer from the garage and carefully pulled the board upward. A cold breeze escaped from the darkness below. There was a narrow staircase leading underground, a place no one in my family had ever mentioned. I switched on my flashlight and slowly looked into the darkness. Then I saw something that made my hands shake. Someone had been there recently because fresh footprints covered the dusty stairs, and a single light was glowing far below, waiting for me. My heart pounded louder with every step as I slowly walked down the narrow staircase. The air became colder, and the smell of damp earth filled the hidden passage. My flashlight trembled in my hand, but the strange light at the end of the tunnel never moved. It looked as if someone was waiting for me in complete silence. Every instinct told me to turn around, but my grandfather had never been afraid of anything, and I wanted to know what he had spent his whole life protecting. When I reached the bottom, I found a small underground room built with old stone walls. There were rusty shelves, wooden boxes, and tools that looked untouched for decades, yet the footprints in the dust were fresh. Someone had entered this place only hours before me. I searched the room carefully, but there was no sign of another person. Only a small lantern hanging from a hook was still burning, as if it had been lit moments earlier. In one corner stood a heavy steel safe covered with dirt. My grandfather had never mentioned owning a safe. I tried the handle, but it would not open. Then I noticed a folded piece of paper hidden beneath the lantern. My name was written across the front in my grandfather's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. The note said, "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Trust no one, not even family. They will tell you to sell this house because they do not know what is hidden beneath it. The money was never stolen. It was earned through sacrifice and protected for one reason only: the person who chooses truth over greed deserves to find it." As I finished reading, I heard a loud noise from upstairs. Someone had entered the house. I froze and listened carefully. Slow footsteps moved across the old wooden floor above me. Then a deep voice echoed through the basement saying, "I know you found the entrance. You are not supposed to be here." Fear rushed through my body. I quickly blew out the lantern and hid behind the steel safe, trying not to breathe. The footsteps came closer until they stopped right outside the underground room. Through a small crack, I saw a pair of polished black shoes standing only a few feet away. Then the stranger quietly whispered, "Your grandfather promised he would never tell anyone where the $5 million was hidden, but now you know, and that means you are in terrible danger." My entire body froze as the stranger stood only a few steps away. I covered my mouth to stop my breathing and prayed he would not hear my heartbeat. The basement became completely silent for what felt like forever. Then the man slowly walked inside carrying a bright flashlight. Its beam moved across the walls, searching every corner. I stayed hidden behind the heavy steel safe, afraid that even the smallest movement would reveal where I was. The stranger looked like he was in his 60s. He wore a dark coat, leather gloves, and carried an old key hanging from a silver chain around his neck. Was the same unusual compass I had seen in one of my grandfather's old family photographs. My mind raced with questions. Who was this man, and why did he have something that belonged to my grandfather? He stopped in front of the safe and smiled as if he already knew its secret. Then he spoke in a calm voice, "Your grandfather was a stubborn man. He refused every offer I made because he believed the money should never belong to people driven by greed. He thought one day his grandchild would come back and finish what he started." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out another folded letter before placing it on the safe. He whispered, "If you are here, then I know you are watching. Read this after I leave." Then he turned around. I froze and listened carefully, and slowly walked back toward the staircase. His footsteps faded until the old house became silent once again. I waited several minutes before stepping out from my hiding place. My hands were still shaking as I picked up the letter. The paper was old and worn, but the handwriting was clearly my grandfather's. It said, "Never trust the man with the silver compass. He helped me build this place many years ago. But he betrayed me when he discovered what was hidden here. He has spent decades searching for the final key. The money is only part of the secret. There is something far more valuable buried inside this house. If he reaches it before you, everything I sacrificed will be lost forever." As I finished reading, I noticed something strange. The silver key hanging from the safe was missing. I looked toward the staircase and realized the stranger had secretly taken it before leaving. Then, I heard the sound of a car engine outside, followed by tires speeding away. At that exact moment, a small section of the stone wall suddenly cracked open by itself, revealing a narrow hidden tunnel that had been sealed for decades. And deep inside the darkness, a faint golden light began to shine, as if another secret had been waiting for me all along. For a few moments I could only stare at the glowing tunnel. My grandfather had hidden one secret behind another, as if he knew someone would eventually find the basement. The opening was so narrow that I had to squeeze through sideways. The air inside felt warmer and strangely clean, unlike the damp basement behind me. Every step echoed through the passage, and the golden light grew brighter until I reached a small underground chamber unlike anything I had ever imagined. The room looked untouched by time. Wooden shelves lined the walls holding old journals, maps, and locked metal boxes. In the center stood a large oak table. On top of it rested a faded leather bag beside an old photograph. I picked up the picture and felt my heart stop. It showed my grandfather standing next to the same man with the silver compass. They were smiling like brothers before greed destroyed everything they had once trusted each other with their lives. Beneath the photograph was another handwritten message my grandfather knew I would find it. One line stood out immediately: "The money is only a test. The real treasure is hidden where only honesty can open the door." I opened the leather bag and found dozens of old bank documents, property records, and a small golden key wrapped inside a piece of cloth. A symbol was carved into the key exactly like the symbol engraved on the steel safe upstairs. Suddenly I realized the stranger had stolen the wrong key. He believed the silver key unlocked the fortune, but my grandfather had hidden the real key here all along. Just as relief washed over me, I heard a loud crash from above. Someone had broken into the house again. This time there were several voices shouting to each other. They were searching every room and moving furniture as if they knew exactly what they wanted. I quickly turned off my flashlight and listened. One of the voices yelled, "He is still here. Find him before he reaches the vault." My pulse raced. They knew about the hidden chamber. I grabbed the leather bag, the journals, and the golden key, then looked for another way out. At the far end of the chamber, I noticed a rusty metal door half covered by dirt. I forced it open with all my strength and a cold breeze rushed inside. Outside the door was a narrow escape tunnel leading deep into the forest, but before I could take another step I saw fresh footprints in the mud. Someone had already escaped through this tunnel only minutes earlier, and lying on the ground was the silver compass with a single note attached. It read, "You are closer than anyone has ever been, but the $5 million is no longer where your grandfather left it." It showed my grandfather. I picked up the silver compass and turned it over in my hands. A tiny button was hidden beneath the glass. When I pressed it, the compass opened like a locket. Inside was a faded photograph of my grandfather as a young man standing beside a little girl I had never seen before. On the back of the picture were only a few words: "Find Grace and the truth will find you." I slipped the compass into my pocket and followed the fresh footprints through the forest. The trail led to an abandoned wooden cabin hidden between tall pine trees. The windows were broken, and the roof was falling apart. But someone had been living there recently. Cut firewood stood outside and smoke still drifted from the old chimney. I slowly pushed the door open, expecting to find the stranger. Instead I found an elderly woman sitting quietly beside the fireplace. She looked at me without surprise, as if she had been waiting for this moment all her life. Before I could speak she smiled and softly said, "You have your grandfather's eyes." My heart nearly stopped. "Are you Grace?" I asked. She nodded and tears filled her eyes. "Your grandfather promised he would send someone one day. If he never came back, he knew people would keep chasing the money, but he hoped you would search for the truth instead." Grace opened an old wooden chest and removed a bundle of letters tied together with a blue ribbon. She handed them to me, saying, "These letters explain everything. The $5 million was never meant to make anyone rich. It was meant to protect hundreds of families from losing their homes. Your grandfather created a secret fund after the financial crisis, but greedy people wanted to steal it before it could help anyone." As I read the first letter, I finally understood why the stranger had hunted my grandfather for so many years. The money belonged to a charitable trust that had never been claimed. Without the final documents, no bank would ever release it. Suddenly the cabin door slammed open. The man with the silver compass stepped inside, followed by two armed men. His face was no longer calm. He pointed directly at me and shouted, "Give me the letters and the golden key, or neither of you will leave this place alive." Grace quietly leaned toward me and whispered, "There is one final secret your grandfather never wrote down. Only you can unlock it. But if he gets the key first, every family your grandfather wanted to save will lose everything forever." The cabin fell silent as the stranger pointed at me. His hands were shaking with desperation, not confidence. I looked at Grace, then at the golden key in my pocket, and finally understood what my grandfather had been trying to teach me. The greatest treasure was never the money, it was the chance to protect people who had no one else to help them. The stranger stepped closer and demanded the key one last time. Instead of handing it over, I threw the silver compass onto the floor. His attention shifted for a single second. That was enough. Grace pulled a hidden lever beside the fireplace, and a thick wooden shelf swung open, knocking one of the armed men to the ground. I ran through the hidden passage behind the cabin with the letters and the golden key while Grace locked the entrance behind us. The tunnel led to a small stone building that looked like an abandoned church. Inside stood an old iron vault with the same symbol carved into its door. I placed the golden key into the lock and turned it slowly. The heavy door opened with a deep echo. Inside were not mountains of cash but sealed bank files, legal documents, and several secure metal cases. One case contained enough cash to begin helping families immediately, but the real fortune was protected in investment accounts worth more than $5 million. The papers proved that every dollar legally belonged to the charitable trust my grandfather had created decades earlier. Within minutes, police officers arrived. They had been tracking the stranger after years of financial crimes. Grace had secretly contacted them. Before I reached the cabin, the stranger tried to escape, but he was arrested outside the church together with his partners. Weeks later, the courts confirmed the documents were genuine. The trust was finally activated. Hundreds of struggling families received help keeping their homes, paying medical bills, and giving their children a better future. My grandfather's dream had survived because he trusted that one day someone would choose kindness instead of greed. I decided not to sell the old house. I restored every room and turned it into the headquarters of the foundation. His photograph now hangs above the entrance, reminding everyone that true wealth is measured by the lives we change, not by the money we keep. Sometimes I still walk through that old house late at night, remembering his final words, "Everything you need is already waiting for you." He was right all along. The greatest inheritance was never the $5 million. It was the legacy of compassion that changed countless lives forever.